What's up, military millionaires? I'm your host, David Pere, and I'm here with my co-host, Alexander Felice. And our guest today is Neil Wahlgren, who was a Air Force and Navy C-130 pilot who has logged over 2,500 flight hours, Iraq, Afghanistan, a whole bunch of other stuff, as well as having been to the Air Force Academy. And he now works with MAG Capital Partners, and he is essentially has raised over $200 million for projects. And he was a capital raiser and then ended up jumping into one of the companies that they used to help raise money for. And so this is just gonna be a lot of fun because I know raising money is kind of a scary topic for a lot of people. And it was a lot harder for me when I first got into it than I thought it would be. And I don't know that I heard people talk about it and I was like, okay, yeah, it'll be fine. And it was not as easy as I thought. So I think this will be a good conversation for me, a good conversation for you, and a good conversation for everyone else. So Neil, welcome to the show, brother.
Cool. Thanks so much for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you give a little of your background for how you got into real estate?
Welcome to the Military Millionaire Podcast, where we teach service members, veterans, and their families how to build wealth through personal finance, entrepreneurship, and real estate investing. I'm your host, David Pere, and together with my co-host, Alex Felice, we're here to be your no BS guides along the most important mission you'll ever embark on, your finances.
Vehicle 1, you're clear to depart friendly lines.
Roger, Vic 1, Oscar Mike.
Like you said, had a little stint in the Air Force, then the Navy Reserves, flying Hercs. Same plane, both services, just better looking uniforms on the Navy side. But that and the fact that all the Navy bases are right on the coast. So my choices were either stay in Abilene, Texas, or Little Rock, or go out and ended up flying outside of Malibu, right on the coast of SoCal there. So, but yeah, ultimately did that for a while, and really enjoyed it. But someone had introduced me early on to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I know a lot of either yourselves or your listeners have probably heard it before, read it. Highly recommend it if you haven't. And really, it just kind of, to me, it sparked something that said, hey, if I continue on the pilot track, which most of my peers and colleagues who I used to fly with did, most of them went on to fly for Delta or United or one of the commercial carriers, you're still ultimately tied to your time and you're paid hourly. And there's really no great way to kind of scale that in terms of a profession if you want to make your money start to work for you in a way that you are not required to be there day in and day out for it. So that was kind of my, my catalytic moment, I guess you could say. And, I started looking at some different options, worked a little bit for a startup down in SoCal, and that was fun. It was the first time I'd really, especially from, in contrast with the whole, military life and structure, to go, hey, I was head of business development for this carbon byproduct. The company didn't even know if they could sell it, if they'd have to pay to dump it. I mean, really, it was kind of the Wild West. And they're like, here's some money, hire a team, find some potential trial customers, see if you can sell it, see what you can sell it for. And ultimately, I did this for about 3 or 4 years and really enjoyed it, and kind of the entrepreneurial side of it, and, just the a bit of the uncertainty that went with it, but potentially huge rewards if you ended up landing, a good contract or, a good sales pipeline there. So, I think, yeah, that was the initial, trigger coming out of the Air Force to, more of the entrepreneurial track that ultimately went to real estate.
First taste of meritocracy.
Yeah, absolutely there. Yeah. And once you get a taste, it's hard to turn around, so.
Yeah, because once you, the safety net feels good when you have it. And then when you get rid of it, you're like, you know what? It's not as good as you think. And living this other way, it's like people go, but it's so you're worried about your paycheck. It's so stressful. I'm like, bro, W-2 people got stressed too.
Yep.
You might as well be on your terms. And like you said, unlimited upside.
Unlimited.
But,
yeah.
But you only did it for a few years. What did the company, is it still around? Did they sell?
No, they ended up running out of funding. So it was, it had a biofuels renewable energy front side, and then this basically form of carbon that I was working with as a byproduct. And ultimately the front end element turned out not to be as cost efficient as they had hoped. And ultimately the technology wasn't sustainable. But cool field, got to learn a lot about different, renewable energy tracks and pathways. And, I firmly believe at some point in the future, we'll start to see more of a commercial adoption of it.
So you got the bug for capitalism, and then how did you transition from there to real estate?
So I moved up to the Bay. And just, kind of by happenstance, had a personal family friend who had started an equity focused company. They capital raised for other operators or developers and was able to, take that on. The owner had some family issues early on. And so I was able to really kind of take a very high level of responsibility somewhat quickly and, really got to work with a bunch of different operators of different types for commercial real estate. We had, multifamily guys, we had multi-tenant retail, some, land development, entitlement, and it was neat, so really got to see, down to the, numbers. I've always been a numbers guy since the academy. I was operations research major. So liked having the fundamentals and understanding that, and then being able to build kind of a business case and ultimately a sales case for how our network of investors, we could pitch this deal, really outline, hey, this is why we think this is good, and ultimately, bring in typically 100% of the equity on each one of these projects.
I find it fascinating that you would go from an ultimately failed startup, a flyer, call it high risk, high reward, and then you go to real estate, especially commercial real estate, which I find to be one of the lowest risk endeavors that a person that you can possibly invest in. Not to say there's no risk. That's not what I'm saying. But in terms of, those are kind of opposites in the way I analyze them. They're kind of opposites in terms of risk. So was that, is there anything to that? Or?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's all it's relative, right? Ultimately compared to, the bond market, real estate's the Wild West, right? But compared to, crypto and stocks, it looks much more stabilized. For me, especially, kind of from the operational background in the military. I mean, you guys know it. You guys were in when every day you go out, you take risks, right? But you're identifying them, or at least as many as you can. You're kind of encapsulating the risk and how you might react to those. And then ultimately what's left is a fairly narrow margin of the unknown that might actually come in. And I think, that was sort of what attracted me to the real estate side, was that, that there are a lot of ways that this can tank, and mostly it's things that are not in your business plan. It's usually things like COVID, things like, unknown, tax assessor coming and tripling your tax load every year. It could be, a hailstorm that, even the deductible on your insurance policy just, craters your cash flow projections. I mean, there's just a number of things that are hard to plan for. And the more you're able to kind of wrap your head around those and sort of, compartmentalize what you do know, to me, that was, kind of the draw toward the real estate risk side.
So my background is in bank underwriting. So I 100%, that's what I did. Yep. What's everything that could possibly go wrong and then some.
Yep. And how much bad
and I have to argue with you about the bond market. The only reason why the bond market you say is low risk is because it's backed by the US government. If you go to another country without such a stable currency, the bond market ain't that safe. The place to go is real estate then.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah,
that's
Venezuelan bonds are.
That's why the Chinese buy real estate in America.
It's very, very true.
Funny, I'm living in one of those houses right now. All I know is that the guy who owns this house owns 20 or 30 houses cash, and my properties manager's name is, she said he's foreign. Her name is Sarah, but Sarah is spelled Xiaohang. So, Sarah.
100%.
Yeah. Well, buying that house here in US dollars is better than owning it in RMB.
Yeah. Well, so I live in San Francisco, and I mean, literally within eyeshot, I can probably see, 5, 6, 7 top floor penthouse apartments, condos that have never been occupied in years. And they, a lot of them are just, cash buy overseas buyers who come, put the money here because it's safe. And they don't even want to deal with the hassle of a tenant, such that it just makes sense to just hold an empty building. It'll appreciate, they're happy just having something that they know won't crater. And I mean, it's wild when you know how much they could be making just leasing it out in the, the highest rent in the country here, but they choose not to.
Yeah. Some people's problem is they have too much cash, if you can believe it. And they're like, I got to stick this all somewhere.
Yeah.
It's the same logic that goes into like, oh crap, I got to buy a 6,000 pound car to write it off. Like new car, whatever.
Yep.
Like, do you really was that really the best place to park that? Well, better than paying it in taxes. All right. Okay, fine.
Put it somewhere, right? Or a nice lease. Right?
Yeah. Oh man, what an interesting place to be. All right. So you move into the equity world of raising capital. And before we kind of go into where you're now more on the operation side, I'm curious. I have some friends who've been dabbling, or some syndicator buddies who are trying to get into the world of potentially raising from a family office or from a fund. And I'm curious, what makes a attractive operator from the fund's perspective, right? Like, obviously you've got to have a track record, but I guess I'm just curious, like at what level of deal I'm sure it varies, but if you could give some perspective from the fund side, like what you're looking for in a guy who's running multifamily apartments.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just a quick caveat. So when we raise money internally at Mag Capital, we're doing project by project. So we basically create a special purpose LLC, raise money, that LLC buys one property or a known portfolio tenanted by a single tenant. And then, basically stays all together until we sell. So we don't pool funds in a true classic fund structure. Cool. There. But no, to answer your question, how do you effectively escalate to the point where you can start approaching high net worth individuals, family offices, really larger check writers into your deals? For a long time early on, I remember I think I approached some of these groups too early. I was ambitious and I just said, let's go. And my feedback kind of varied from these guys. It was never a yes, right? It was always, hey, you haven't been doing this a long time, come see us when you're further along. And I didn't really understand what that meant. And now fast forward about 5-6 years, I have several clients that are, represent small family offices, some, interesting enough, quite a few Indian groups actually with, both Native American and, some of the effectively the casino business managers take some of that revenue and invest it on behalf of the tribes, which is, more or less a family office if you think about it. Yeah. But ultimately, not only do they look for, track record, but they're also looking for scale. They want to see you to be a size commensurate that their stakeholders expect. And what I mean by that is, if you only have, say, $30 million under management and they're looking to place, I don't know, $5-6 million equity checks, that particular investment would make up a huge percentage of your AUM as an operator. And so if that deal went south, they have to be able to say, hey, they can look at their stakeholders and go, I took a big risk on this deal, and maybe they wouldn't look so great. Maybe they'd have egg on their face. So a lot of them will want you to have not only a track record, but have you done deals at the size of what you're raising for a substantial amount of time. So they're looking for AUM, and they're also looking for kind of maturity in marketing. And I wish it wasn't the case, because not everyone likes to do marketing. You're like, hey, I'm a deal hunter, right? I just want the art of the deal. I can put together the numbers and just kick ass at this. But I mean, to be honest, if you don't have the outside presence, if you don't have the website, if you don't have the company deck, those things are, more or less kind of check the box due diligence that these guys are looking for. And if you don't have them, they're probably just going to go past because, hey, now there's a perceived level of risk with your operation that they're not comfortable with.
This is really, really insightful, actually. Yeah. And I'm glad that you said that, because I've done 2 capital raises now for increasingly larger deals. By your standards, they're incredibly small deals. One was $1 million, one was 3.2 million. I raised 280 and then 1.4 million. So my question to you, I guess, is I wanted to discuss momentum. So again, for like people who are new and they go, well, how come I can't go get this big money? And now I've run into big money now. and people are like, yeah, I have deals for you, but they've told me the same thing as you. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to do it. I'm not giving you money in your first. And now I did my second, and they were like, yeah, I didn't want to do money in this. I didn't want to do it in the second. And I'm starting to get the feeling I wasn't able to articulate it, but the way you articulate it is actually really good. It's like, if you want to go take $1 million, you better not have a portfolio of 2 million, because now they make up 50% of your fund.
Exactly.
So without giving out a number, let's just say, 5%. It's like, you have to there's an uphill momentum battle in this business. The first time you close that $30 million building, it's like the next 30 million will be easier. And then each time it's like, once you have a 100 million in assets, raising 2 million is going to just be far easier, because you are on the other side of the scale.
Absolutely. And another way you can I would say, accelerate that process is set yourself up for success when it comes to scarcity. And again, this is part of the psychology to it. But if you have deals that are filling up immediately and people want to get in who can't, it's hard, right? It sucks. You're calling up your investors and go, I really wanted to get you in this. I couldn't. I put you on a wait list. I'll give you an early look on the next one here. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have, but as a firm, as an operation, it adds just this inherent amount of credibility and substantiation of, really it's FOMO, right? Guys, they want to get in. If they can't, now suddenly, hey, am I missing out on something? Now, hey, this is not an opportunity that I can graze on and look at and pick at a little bit, decide down the road if I get in. Now, suddenly you've created scarcity, and you can do that artificially, right? You can create, maybe you think you can raise 2 million on a deal, but, every once in a while, just choose a small one and make it great. Set up your underwriting that's really investor favored, and just make it so it's going to sell out immediately. And then send out another email 12 hours later and go, we're full. And I swear to God, for the next 5 raises in a row, you'll have people clamoring over themselves because they're like, I missed out on the last one. And it's this self-perpetuating machine that you've created. It's fantastic.
I love it. I like
that advice.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh man. FOMO is so real, but scarcity's so obviously scarcity is great in sales tactics. They always tell you, this deal closes at this time. There's only so many. There's, timer on whenever you're doing like funnels or stuff, like timer on the funnel, like all this stuff. I've never heard anyone describe it with big capital raises like this. And I never even thought about the fact that you could very easily, because a lot of times people send out that email and they just say, hey, thanks, thanks to the investors, whatever. But just intentionally sending out an email that's like, hey, look, we're fully subscribed. I'm sorry for the 15 of you that wanted to get in and couldn't, we'll have another opportunity, whatever. And then you use that as, I guess, effectively ammo on the next one. Like, hey, just make sure you're quick because you filled up in 12 hours last time. That's cool.
On my last deal offering I sent out just a couple of weeks ago, I was able to honestly put, hey, our last deal filled up in less than 24 hours. We filled 4 million in less than 24 hours. And that was in the offering that went out. And this new one, we filled 4.5 million in about 75 minutes. It was wild. Literally, I couldn't even read through the emails at the rate they were coming in, with commitments coming in and boom, boom, boom. And just a great problem.
When you get let me ask you, it's a good problem to have. I'm still learning the systems in the back end.
Sure.
You take the last time. Okay, let me parcel this out. Let's parcel out the thing. So you got is the fund already set up, or do you set it up for? You said you set up for the deals.
So each one's set up. So we'll have the operating account already created. The legal entities are already done. Everything's under contract. The debt, we usually have term sheets on the debt. It's not final yet, but it's near final. And then ultimately, I'm to a point now where I can delay an equity raise till, 10 days before I need a hard close, because I know I can get, commitments and money in the door very quickly.
So I have the opposite problem, right? I need a long.
Sure. No, and it wasn't always this way. Trust me. But.
Yeah. So I need a lot of time. So some of the mistakes I made in this last one was we got the deal into contract, and it felt like it took me a long time before we got the legal entity set up. So I was in a weird limbo where I was like, I really don't want to be asking people for money, because God forbid they say yes. And I'm like, I can't take it from you right now. So yeah. How do I solve that problem?
There's different stages, right? You have, effectively gates between a initial offering and money in the bank. And this is from somewhat systematic and somewhat psychological of what an investor goes through. So they're going to first be exposed to your opportunity, and they're going to process it. And then ultimately they're going to go, this looks interesting, right? And what you want to do is as quickly as possible, get them from that point to a verbal commit. And so, the way we do it, we say, hey, give me a verbal commit early. I use scarcity, and I say, look, these deals fill up quick, right? And they do. And I say, hey, if you give me a verbal commit early, at least that allows me to set those funds aside to make sure we don't oversell them. And, I'm like, at the end of the day, if you look it through, change your mind, not a big deal. We always have a wait list. Just let me know, and no harm, no foul there. But that way, if you want in, you can get in, right? So now I've effectively incentivized an early verbal commitment, right? And then once that happens, you really, before you even solicit that verbal commit, you want to have forms ready, basically your PPMs, your subscription agreements, your legal doc, the operating agreements that they're signing. You want all of those pieces either done or, ready to be finished within a few days, because you have this kind of withering window of excitement, of commitment, of just internal commitment toward this decision, right? And it's super high when they tell you, and it's just slowly going to erode away. And the faster you can get them forms, and the easier, the less friction you can, or the more friction you remove from the process. Now they're going to go and sign those forms, but they haven't funded yet, right? But what I found is you lose a lot more investors between verbal commitments and signed forms than you do between signed forms and actual funding. And technically that form is a legal, really a legal commitment to fund. Let's be honest, someone signs and says, I changed my mind, or, life happened. It's not like you're going to hold them to it and say, you have to put money in this deal. But, from a intentional standpoint, that is the goal, to get them signed quick. And then honestly, you probably want to wait to receive funds until very close to when you close, because otherwise you run the risk of, acting like you're not a good steward of your investors' cash if it's just sitting there in an operating account, not working because you haven't closed on the deal yet.
What's up, military millionaires? I have not done a good enough job talking about syndication opportunities. So for those of you who don't know, I have been investing in some apartment complexes over the years, as well as a bunch of other stuff, but I just have never really mentioned it on the podcast. So I apologize for making that hard to find. Look, if you are an accredited or sophisticated investor, or unsure and would just like to talk, go ahead and go over to the investor from militarymillionaire.com/investor/ and just fill out the little form. Let's jump on a call and talk. I'd love to hear how we can help each other out. So some of the opportunities that we provide can be anything from really big cash flow opportunities to big equity plays. I even do some private lending type stuff, but lots of different opportunities out there to invest. And I just want to make sure that you guys understand those are out there. So if you're interested in syndications or private money, I'd love to jump on a call with you. There are ways that we can help you out. You can help me out. We can help everybody out. Win-win-win-win-win situation. Our most recent deal was 146 units, 7% preferred return, and projected 18% plus return on investment. But we've done better. We've done not quite as good with more equity play, like lots of different opportunities, right? And if you want to be, there's a separate email list that I have, which I send those deals to. And if you want to be on that list, then let's schedule a call and jump on it, because we need to know each other if I'm going to be sending you information on these opportunities. I would hate for you to miss out on it just because of my ugly mug not telling you. So if that sounds interesting, let me know. If that does not sound interesting, enjoy the show right now.
Yeah. So, okay, that helps. I think what I need to do next time is, as soon as I get the thing on the contract, as soon as you get in the contract, you should have legal and the bank account set up
immediately. Yep.
Immediately. So we had a long delay in our last one, and I'm learning. That's something I went through, but I did have that problem. And so I was curious. Yeah. So what you said and what I did is right. I just bad at it still.
I mean, the more you do it, I build a checklist and I mark it out each time, I'm like, how do I improve this? I'm very methodical about it. And I mean, really, it's just from the communication piece to investors, from introducing them to a deal to having money in the bank and closing. And that process is super repeatable no matter what deal you're doing.
Okay, let me switch gears a little bit here. We are experiencing a time of perhaps unprecedented liquidity. What I realized in this last basically deal was, if I poke around, I don't really have an access to money problem. I have an access to good deals problem. Is that how does that work for a guy like you who raises a lot of money? Do you find you're getting oversubscribed on deals? Are you running into a deal scarcity problem?
We are, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say deal scarcity, but we've established a certain profile of what our return structure should look like, what our deal structure should look like. And it's really tempting to keep chasing deals the same way you did 6 months ago. But if you do so, you're going to overpay for them, right? And, that's great if trends continue, but what happens when they don't? Then you don't want to be sitting on, a piece of property that you bought at a high basis instead of what should have been, 20 or 30% lower, and ultimately that's the question, right? Do I chase deals for the sake of chasing deals? Or do I genuinely feel like we have a good basis on this opportunity to weather, whatever recessionary craziness is going to happen in the next few years and, have a decent chance of at least preserving capital, 4 or 5 years down the road?
You said earlier that you were doing 100% equities. I wasn't sure if that was common or that was one deal. Are you guys using debt?
We are. Yeah, I should have specified that a little better. So I raise all the equity for the deals that we put together in Mag Capital. All that's through our organic investor group. Most of our deals, their capital stack is structured roughly about 70% leverage on most of our industrial projects that we do. I mean, really, debt is so cheap right now. I cannot.
That's why I was like,
fathom any way that you shouldn't be doing that. So,
yeah. And then, so I just did my first with the Fannie Mae, non-recourse 10-year, and it's assumable. Is this something you guys use where it makes it kind of lucrative, right? I look at it like, well, if rates stay where they're at, then valuations, cap rates should continue to compress a little bit and valuations should go up. And if the inflation keeps going, then rent prices hopefully will go up. Now, if cap rates decompress because rates go up, then my assumable loan starts to really have a lot of value at 3.5%.
Absolutely.
Do you think that this Fannie Mae debt situation that the way I look at it right now is it's kind of a really good equalizer, not to overpay for deals, but it's kind of it does create a lot of it becomes very forgiving.
Absolutely. And if you were faced with a decision of, the lowest rate, but it's non-assumable versus, a slightly higher one that is, 10 times out of 10, I would choose the latter. I mean, just having options so you're not pinned against a wall in a unknown set of circumstances 4 or 5 years down the road is worth dividends, in my point. And really, I mean, you can sell that to your investor group and go, hey, this is part of our contingency plan, analysis here to go, I don't know what the future is going to look like. Really when we set up our deals, we can control a lot of variables because the leases are full triple net leases, single tenant, right? So I know with a high degree of certainty what cash flow down to the penny will look like even 3-4 years down the road. Anything that comes up, I've effectively removed that risk of expense by structuring my lease so the tenant's responsible for everything. But at the end of the day, when it comes time to sell, I don't know exactly what the world's going to look like, and I don't pretend to, right? And so, what I do tell people is, hey, I've signed a 20-year lease. We're planning on holding this thing for 5. I got 15 years left on this, right? It's fairly attractive with 10 or more years. So that gives me an additional 5 years of buffer. And then in addition, debt, would try to get 10-year term on the debt. So that means, hey, you know what? If I don't sell at 5, if the world sucks, if industrial's in the tanks, I can at least afford to sit on here comfortably another 2, 3, 4 years without, worrying about forced into a refi or forced to sell because of some outside factor, because I've built in flexibility on that side.
That's awesome.
Yeah, my strategy right now, sorry, David, I know you want to get in here. My strategy right now, I think that I think the money right now is in debt. I think the debt is like the rates are cheap. And if you can get government backed debts for either single family, for our listeners, a lot of our listeners are doing single family properties, like that 30-year fixed rate mortgage is like the dream. And then if you go big, I think the Fannie Mae debt is good. I think the 5-year balloons from commercial mortgages are the scariest thing around right now. A 5-year with a call, I think that's a risky place to be right now. But the government backed loans, that's good business. That's good money.
Yeah. And I would say as operator sponsors, it's tempting to follow investor inclinations of chasing returns, right? They're always like, hey, I want that extra percentage point on the projections. I'll put money in a 16 IRR projection deal over a 15 one. More and more, especially after I've been in this space, it's our responsibility as operators and sponsors to kind of train and condition our investor groups to say, hey, we're not always going to chase the highest return projections, because having options down the road, especially in today's world where, it's very good right now, but it could be very not good, 5 years down, that, hey, we'll take a, 200 basis point haircut on projections in favor of having options down the road. And that, that's a sleep easy decision right there. That helps you sleep well and, not fret over that investment for, years to come.
Yeah. I think that, I went through this twice now where it's like, I'm a habitual under, promise, over deliver. And that's very difficult in this market because everybody's like, IRR porn.
Yep.
Right. And it's just, and I'm like, I don't want to lie to you. And the messed up thing is if Federal Reserve Chairman announced that rates are going to stay low till 2024, the chances that this thing gets even better is high. And so next thing I know, it's like, dude, I could be losing investors because I'm not making my projections outlandish enough. And then God forbid I actually hit them because the market continues. So it's a very weird time because I am of the opinion, it's like, look, let me under promise and over deliver. But then I'm losing buyers because they're like, well, that guy over there is hitting a 20% IRR. And I'm like, well, he's projecting that the cap rates are going to decrease another 1.5 points. Yep. Yeah. So it's a weird time.
No, I think you're stay the course on it, and trust me, like as you build your track record, hitting or exceeding projections and having the numbers to show when you start exiting deals, that is when it all comes full circle. And you can chase projections early on, but you're making it very hard to hit those marks. We as a company have really, very much done the same thing. And we've been fortunate. Really 100% of our exits, we've exited 13 deals. Every single one has hit or exceeded our projected IRRs. That's a great story to tell. And if you build yourself some buffer in there where you're able to here's a little bit of advice, especially early on, I think operators are highly, it is very beneficial to your overall future business growth to set up a few easy win short-term investments such that you feel comfortable. You can exit in 18 months, 24 months. You don't need to make a lot of money, but just hit your marks, right? And if you can deliver, say, if you promise a 15% IRR and you can deliver a 16% and you held it for 12 months, it doesn't matter. Now you're substantiating that track record. You're showing, hey, I projected this, I delivered better, and getting 2-3 of those under your belt will substantially help you raise, even for longer term projects beyond that.
That's awesome.
And you learned what you're doing. That's the biggest thing for me. This is the part that we haven't really talked about. And again, I don't know how deep into the deals, into the asset management you get, if at all, or see the deals. I know you work in ops and capital. I do a little bit of both capital, and I go, I'm on boots on the ground a little bit, and having that, just the experience, I'm doing conservative projections. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to beat them. right? But I built myself in a little bit of like, hey, the world might fall apart. Don't get. But more than anything, it's like I'm learning how to do this for a career's worth of future, not just, oh, here's a deal or two. It's like, no, I'm going to get better at this. And then one of the things I have been thinking about, like you mentioned, is I want to keep those, like, what's my track record for hitting projections? Not just can you make money, but can you make the money you say? Because, at the end of the day, you don't want to be the guy who's like, I told you I was going to hit 15, well, we only hit 12. It's like, yeah, but 12 is pretty good. It's like, that's not the point.
I talked to a real kind of seasoned investor in my group, and this guy, he's probably got 50 LP positions across different syndicators. He's a big fan of our group. And really, I value that feedback more from him because he has the comparative, alternatives to look at, how other sponsors have delivered, how they've communicated, really all those pieces. And he comes to us and he really kind of reinforces what we're doing right, which I love. But he's funny. He's like, honestly, he's like, I don't even look at projections anymore. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah. He's like, nobody knows what the fuck's going to happen in 5 years. Right. Honestly. And he's like, they are spinning gold out of their ass. I mean, that was literally his quote. And I was like, huh. And he's like, honestly, what I care about is protect capital. He's like, you know what, at the end of the day, if you can return my capital, I count it as a win. And I'm like, interesting. Yeah. He's like, anything beyond that's gravy. I appreciate it. And he's like, most operators will, but he's like, if they communicate well and protect my capital, do not lose capital. He's like, the rest of the returns, I'm happy anywhere in there. And he's like, that the year to year cash flow, he's like, I value that so much higher than any, projected profit piece upon sale 5 years from now. Because he's like, there's just so much uncertainty on that piece. And really what's funny is that back end, profit split piece is so influential on where your projected IRR lands that, the more seasoned guys really just stop caring about it because they know, nobody knows.
We are in the highest period of volatility that I've certainly that I've lived through. And I read a lot of history, a lot of economic history, and it's like kind of some of the highest part of the future is more unknown than many times in the past. So when we were doing our projections, I have a history in underwriting, like I said. So, but even the banks are, it's like the bank bar will come to the bank and say, here's my projections. And then the bank will make projections and then neither are right. It's true. Years goes by. It's like, oh, we both were wrong, Yeah. So when I sold this last deal, it was, hey, look, number one is preservation of capital. Mm-hmm. Number one is preservation of capital. So I'm definitely not going to lose your money. I might even make some.
No, honestly, like, and the more I've been in this game, that is a premise of a sales pitch that I would be interested in, like, tell me more, tell me how you're not going to lose my money and you might make me some money. Like, yeah, it's better than what a bank account does. Right.
Yeah, I think there's David, I'm totally hijacking your podcast right now.
I know this is the Alexander Felice show.
Yeah. So, let's talk about different investor segments. So there's definitely the newer, call it new money investors who are chasing returns, and maybe we've been in an economic, monster for the last 12 years. So a lot of people have money to toss around. Liquidity is really high. I mean, it sucks to be in cash right now. So everybody's trying to get that money working. And so they're chasing what we said, IRR porn. But then there's definitely I'm using the term old money, but I think it just means people who are, say, older that have a nest egg. And they're like, look, I don't care about fancy returns. What I care about is what you said, preservation of capital. And like, hey, look, S&P habitually earns 8%. If you can make me 8.5, I'm a happy camper. Mm-hmm. So do you, are those noticeable demographics for you, or is it more complicated than that?
I would say on the spectrum of, private placement, commercial real estate investments, largely office, industrial, throw in some, self-storage, multifamily, et cetera. I would say industrial, especially single tenant net leased industrial, is probably on the lower end of the risk spectrum. And initially I expected to have, largely an older demographic that was, really didn't necessarily chase that big value add bump that you might potentially get on riskier deals, but, instead really just valued that, kind of tax mitigated high cash flow from day one, no expenses, and really valued that consistency. But really, what I found is it's not the case. And, we have young people, we have old people. I would say that there really is no demographic push toward an older, quote unquote, less or more risk averse segment there. Ultimately, I think a lot of folks, even younger, are saying having consistent cash flow to maybe augment some of the riskier bets we're making kind of helps my whole portfolio feel good. And honestly, I mean, during COVID, I think a lot of guys saw deals that maybe didn't crater, but certainly took a huge step back, or 3 steps back, 10 steps back, in terms of where they hoped it would be and what it's actually delivering. And so having some of these kind of sleep easy, steady investments that they keep paying whether COVID happens or not. I mean, these tenants are big credit tenants. Most of them are, do $70-80 million a year in sales. They have good cash reserves. They pay the rent on time, and, we distribute out. So having a little element of that, I was surprised to see how attractive that was, or appealing that was to younger people in a very similar way to older people.
Yeah. When things are going really well and everybody's winning, I want my 16 or 20% IRR. When shit hits the fan, I want my 8%. Please give me my 8%.
Yeah. Well, and we've been fortunate, on these, because we're not dealing with credit tenants. So, if you're putting in tenants like Walgreens, like, Home Depot, McDonald's, even, you have a very low risk tenant, but your returns are going to, cash flow, you might be looking at about 4%. IRRs might be, 8, 9, 10, maybe 11%. But when you deal with what are called sub-investment grade tenants, where they don't have an outside Moody's or S&P giving you a credit score, now you play in kind of more of the equivalent of a Class B multifamily, right? Where there's a bit more, I would say perceived risk, at least. And that's really where we play in. And that space, I mean, we've been able to deliver high teens, maybe not high teens, but 16, 17% IRRs fairly consistently full cycle on the deals we've exited. And that's because in my opinion, these are growth oriented companies. And especially a lot of them will do sale leasebacks, effectively sell us the real estate shortly after they've been acquired by private equity groups. And so now, the PE groups like to pull the equity out of the real estate and reinvest it into their operational companies. And when that happens, if they're successful, a lot of times they grow these tenant companies, sometimes 2-3x the size over the time frame that we own the real estate. And now when we go to sell, we have a much stronger tenant in place than when we bought it. And that you can actually see some pretty decent cap compression because you've lowered the risk of the investment, because now it's just simply a stronger tenant.
Anything else, Alex?
we can unpack that all day long. But
I'd like to introduce you to my co-host, David Pere. He has a microphone too.
Oh man! Unfortunately, we're coming close to time on this. I was going to ask. I wanted to kind of dig into the industrial master leases and net leases, but we may just have to have you back on the show a second time, and we can get more into the logistics of actually what you guys are operating in, because that's also an asset class that we haven't, and a style of investing that we haven't had a chance to discuss on the show before. And I find very interesting that a lot of people don't tap into, right? Like the apartments are sexy right now. Mobile homes are sexy. House flipping and HGTV before and after photos on Instagram with your champagne is sexy. Industrial is not what people think of when they think of the sexy real estate, but obviously there's a lot to it. And I think it's really cool. So yeah, I definitely want to get you back and talk and dig through that a little bit as well. But holy smokes, I learned a lot. I mean, if you notice, I just sitting back, like staring at the ceiling, trying to like keep up on some of this. Like this was really, really insightful as far as, especially like the different gates in raising money, right? Where you can get the verbal commitment to like get somebody pot committed even before you have the ability to take funds. Like that's huge. I mean, I did the same thing on the first time I ever raised money. I shoot, I did it recently. I was waiting to figure out exactly my play with the deal before I raised the $50K to close this little tiny private loan house when I could have had them. And so I ended up like raising it in the last 3 days of the deal instead of just being like, oh, hey, dude, you want to give me 50 grand for this house? Cool. I'll let you know if I need it for sure. It's a lot of really good insight, Neil. Barry didn't let us down. So
cool. No, I really enjoyed the talk here. Yeah. I'd love to come on another episode if you guys want to unpack the industrial space a little more too.
Oh, Alex is taking a photo. Wave. All right. So before we go, where can people get a hold of you if they would like to follow up with you, ask questions, or get on your investor list?
Yeah. And, some general info is our website, www.magcp.com. That's magcp.com. Or you can just shoot me a note direct. I mean, literally, I do this full time. Love to take, questions, comments, hear what you thought of the show here. Or if you're interested in getting on our investor list, you can reach out. It's Neil, Neil, like Neil Diamond, at magcp.com.
Can I just say how much I appreciate your domain name? There are people who come on this podcast. I'm like, where can you get a hold of them? And it's like alphabetsoup.genz/x_-- .com. And you're like, oh, cool. Great. Yeah. I'm listening to this while I'm driving down the road. I got that. So yeah, magcp.com is simple and easy. And I think that's honestly a really smart marketing move, myself included. My domain name is too long and I've owned that for a very long time. So, well done.
Short and sweet, right?
That's it, man. Neil, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've gotten a ton out of this, and we'll definitely have to have you back on the show to talk industrial net leases and all that good stuff as well.
Cool. Looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to another episode about my journey from military to millionaire. If you liked it, be sure to visit FromMilitaryToMillionaire.com/podcast to subscribe to future podcasts. While you're there, we'd love for you to rate the show, give us a review on iTunes. Now get out there and take action.